Please welcome to the stage, Deborah Frincke.
Well, hello all, and I think I'm going to take my cue from the last speaker. I'm going to take the podium and I'm going to take the space right next to it. So, yes, because she's absolutely right. We need to own our space and our place and the need for us at the table. I also want to say another thing, and I have to just take one moment out of my now 19 and 38 seconds to look at you. I was here at the first of these, but even more importantly, I was here for part of Amberine's journey towards the first of these. I don't know how many of you realize that she began the idea for WiCyS while she was untenured. She literally put her career progression a little bit on hold, or so perhaps at risk, or just worked extra hard to get that research done in order to do something and give back to all of us. And so if we could just give her another round of applause for that. That is bravery, and that is taking care of one another. So since I was here 10 years ago, they asked me to come and talk about some of the things I've been doing since then, what's been happening in cyber. And so I have some of that, and it's not all cyber this time. So let's go ahead, and I guess I get to advance this now to the next slide. Here's where I am today. Today I am at Sandia National Laboratories. I am Associate Lab Director, Vice President, whatever you want to call it, for national security programs there, which is pretty broad. I'll talk to you about that. I want to tell you what Sandia does. Sandia is really critical. It's a place, you see I'm wearing my 75-year pin here. It was evolved 75 years ago and is a critical part of the deterrence, the nuclear deterrence and the deterrence against threats from adversaries. And our goal is to provide extraordinary service to the nation in order to keep all of us safer and more secure, and we do that in a variety of ways. And here's some of those. So for one, there is, of course, the nuclear deterrent. Second, global security. This includes things such as non-proliferation. It includes support for IAEA. There is a cyber component to this, but I'm weaving it in because this is the organization that helps nations that need nuclear medicine to help keep one another safe in a healthy way while keeping those plants secure. So there's a need for cybersecurity there. And as a two-time breast cancer survivor, I am very grateful for that particular technology. Yeah, it's been quite a journey. National security programs, I'll tell you a little bit after I tell you what I've been doing before getting to Sandia, but that's Department of Defense, Intelligence Community, Energy and Homeland Security is climate, it includes our DH works, et cetera, and we have a lot of advanced technology and science going on. We did something like $140 billion of give back to the community in terms of creating jobs and so on since 2020, and about $4.8 billion just this last year, which was incredible, and about $1 and change billion of that is in my portfolio, but well, that's a conversation for later. It's busy. It's busy, and I never would have thought those numbers. So I wanted to take you just back a little bit. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide. I wanted to mention I've been a couple of places. So I was here in 2014, as mentioned. I've had a lot of my career, a lot of the transformative work in my career, actually every year has been transformative, but I think as a leader, the time at National Security Agency ranks highest, that 2011 through 2020. That's where I learned people first, mission always. Or you can say it, mission first, people always. I don't like it that way. I like to say people first, mission always, because you cannot accomplish your mission. And my personal mission is to help make the nation safer and more secure, primarily through cybersecurity, but now broadening, as I say. I went to Oak Ridge National Lab. I was actually there 2 years. I started right at the start of COVID. That is not a great time to transition. So I helped National Security Agency kind of wind down, and then Oak Ridge as it was winding back up, and then Sandia as well. And so that's been quite a time, but we've all lived that, and this is more about cyber. So I really wanted to talk about this and just lightly touch some of the changes and the kinds of things, and mention a few of the extraordinary women who have been part of my journey and really helpful along the way. I want to step back to 2014. At that time, I was involved in being in my diversity assignment. Now, what did I mean by a diversity assignment? Sometimes people, not so much nowadays, and I think this is healthy, but sometimes people go and they stay at one organization in one unit their whole careers. That used to be very common. I think my dad was a faculty member his entire life. He was great at that. That was the only thing that he did. I tend not to focus that long, as you noticed, and I also had an academic career in another national lab in there before 2014. But my diversity assignment at NSA was intended to help me figure out more about what's going on there. Before coming back, the intent was to bring me back as the research director. And I discovered something really cool. If you want to know people's hopes and dreams, you offer them research. We can do anything together. The world is our oyster. We will do this work together and tech transfer it. If you want to find out the problems in an organization, go to training. Because it's always training's fault if people get things wrong. And so I discovered while I was there that a lot of things that weren't quite right fell in my back pocket as commandant. I love that title, to help fix. And one of the things that I helped fix was we didn't have a college for cybersecurity then. And we had so much security at NSA, you almost can't think of National Security Agency without thinking of the cyber mission, but we didn't have that. We had some courses. And so I knew I was only there for a year and a half, and I thought, well, it takes a bureaucracy about 5 years to do anything, so what are we going to do about getting this cyber college started? And so I decided on something that I called the incipient cybersecurity college. And what that meant is I made it up. And it wasn't approved yet, and identified a bunch of people to be faculty, et cetera, and we launched it, and we all worked together. And the reason that that worked was probably threefold. One, I was lucky to have people that trusted me to follow that lead because we didn't have written approval. We didn't have things in triplicate. We did not have the bureaucracy behind us. But we had behind us something more important. We had Liz Brooks, who is Chief of Staff of National Security Agency, and she trusted me that I could get this done. So we actually did. We got a cyber college established in something like 6 or 7 months, which was almost unheard of, and it was mostly because we pretended it was there well before it was. They actually did sign the paperwork before I left. The second thing I want to mention is another thing. So that sounds like a big pivot, cybersecurity, and now we're talking cyber college. Well, now back I am in 2015, and we had another issue. It was quantum. So most of you probably are aware that a sufficiently large quantum computer can be used via Shor's algorithm to break PKI, and pretty much everything we do, from banking to crypto, everything is based upon that. So kind of a problem. And so we were able to begin at NSA exploring this issue. And what I can say about it is in 2015 is when we were allowed to start talking about it. I think you would hope that we noticed that quantum was a thing earlier than that. But we began working that. Now, why did that work? At that point, it was, again, Elizabeth Brooks who allowed me to go out and do some public speaking. Because what we saw was that sometimes when you tell people there's a problem coming, they double down and get a solution. And sometimes when you tell them there's a problem coming, they slap things together and call it good. And and the last thing you want to slap together is a crypto algorithm, right? You never slap those together. And so they allowed me to go out and do a little bit of speaking and say, you know, it is a problem, think about the transition, but make sure you get a validated algorithm. And so NSA and NIST did a lot of work together, and many other agencies, and so now we have some algorithms that have been worked. So that was great, but Liz Brooks was partly why I was able to stick my neck out like that. 2017, now here you notice I mentioned adversarial AI, and I'll just say that it's a bit of a missed opportunity in our nation that we're now having that conversation in 2024, because in 2017 it was clear that adversarial AI was going to be a problem, particularly in cybersecurity. And the issue is that if you're going to automate and you're going to have planning and you're going to turn these things potentially loose, it's A, very destabilizing, B, you can't really control it, and C, if somebody does manage to control it, they can do a great deal of damage. And so we had an internal conversation and decided and took what somebody quoted it as there were probably a lot of raised eyebrows, and yes, there were a lot of raised eyebrows. But I did not go rogue on this. I got buy-in all the way to the top. This was something the DERNSA had to sign off for, and was allowed to talk about the criticality of adversarial AI back in 2017. And so some places began to work that issue. Not everyone did, but at least we tried. 2019, I want to go back. I will say I am a techno geek. Policy is not really my thing. However, every now and again we have to step up In 2019, I want to just mention that we started a committee called Economic and Security Implications of Quantum. It was the classified version of the open work on quantum that was done in terms of pulling the nation together behind that. The reason I'm really proud of that is that this is one of those things when you get into leadership roles, when you're a cybersecurity chief scientist or you're in the trenches, you look back at the algorithms you developed and so on. And what I'm most proud about that is I got them to say economic first. And you can laugh about that, but the reason we had to say economic first is that the impetus of this was coming from the security side. And the last thing you want to do with a potentially transformative technology, well, one, you don't want to get it wrong, but two, you don't want to stifle creativity for fear, unbased fear at that point that you weren't going to be secure fast enough, because it looked like we were going to be secure fast enough. And so it was really important that we talked about what you could do on the economic side, and I think that the world has borne that out. There's several other things I want to mention. I do want to say, in terms of other things I've gotten into, 2022, again, these are all collaborative, but I got pulled back on quantum, so Biden put me on his National Quantum Initiative Advisory Committee. And ironically, after getting economic put in front, now I'm supposed to make the security phases, but that's been great. I also picked up another task, and that is working with Strategic Command. So most of you have looked in the news and know a lot about what's going on overseas, at least I hope you are. And clearly, cyber needs to be a place in this. If you think about, now most of you I don't have to think about this, but when you think about the nuclear deterrent, you talk about escalation ladders. No one wants to start with nuclear weapons, ever. And so when you think about what nations might do to engage in conflict that's lesser, cybersecurity is considered one of those pieces that's lesser, so still something that can cause a fight, but it shouldn't take you to nuclear, so there's a lot of conversation along that board, and the Defense Science Board and reduction. The reason I mention those is that I think when I was in university, I believed that once I got out, I would have a day job, and that was pretty much all I'd spend my time on, really working with it. I mean, after all, I've got 2,300 people that work with me now. We'd have a really broad portfolio that I'll show you in a moment. But the fact is, continuing to volunteer is a critical part of our career growth. And so I just encourage you to think about that. I know that the organizers here put a tremendous amount of time into that. And also pick things that you volunteer for that terrify you. And I do mean that. So just picture, I was voted, and you may or may not believe this, shyest in my high school class, among other things, but I was listed. I tied with someone else for the very shyest. And this last week, I had to say some things to the four-star general in charge of Strategic Air Command in front of his entire team, and my boss and his boss, my boss's boss, and all of those folks that maybe weren't going to be so popular. And was I confident in that? In what I had to say? Yes. In that I was going to get out of there unscathed? No. So it worked out well, but please do pick things that stretch you and cause you to grow and that let you contribute. So now to tell you a little bit what we're working on today, and I'm not going to dive into all of this, but I just want to give you a sense of the breadth. Cyber can take you anywhere. So you might think that someone who started with defensive cyber, and you look at this, and I'm going to show you something about hypersonics in a moment, why on earth would I end up in these places? And it's because cybersecurity, whether it's used as a protection or you're thinking about its use in warfare, touches every one of these things. We do strategic rad-hard work in our fab. That's the MESA, the Microelectronics and Technology Research Area. That fab itself has to be secure. We do work in surveillance and recon. That's really radar and SAR and things like that. We do a lot of EW work in that area as well. That had best be cyber secure. Think swarms in space. Those things had better work and not be corruptible by the adversary. I'll talk a little bit about hypersonics in a moment. AI has always been a part of cyber, and so really understanding that is important. We have rebranded cyber. We used to say something much more cagey than cyber threat, but we look at cyber threat, cyber physical systems in particular, but other things as well, and then proliferation assessment. Cyber underlies all of these. So while it seems odd to me to stand up here and say I have all of this in my portfolio now, it still seems like a bit of a dream, a happy dream, but I wouldn't have expected it. It's only possible because the breadth of cyber touches everything, which means that everything you do could potentially take you to some really cool and interesting And there you go. So the shyest kid in high school is now responsible for that particular explosion you saw. That was we have responsibility for the hypersonic slide body, and that was our takeoff from our site in Kauai. Now, there is that aspect of it. There's also, actually, I will back up, and I may end on this rather than going much further forward. There's a lot involved in a hypersonics rocket. Some of it, of course, is you need to be sure the electronics are going to be secure, thumbs up. As fast as that goes, a lot of it's automated. You need to be sure that when you develop it, that the plans and et cetera, and we do a lot of collaboration with this, that those collaborations are secure and that the security does not get in the way of collaboration. People talk a lot about need to know. There is a need to share. And the need to share is just as important as the need to know. And I will say what I've said in many places, 9/11 was not only a need to know issue, it was a lack of need to share. And I've talked to many people who were there and say that that lack of sharing may have been more important than the compartments and lack of need to know. So that's important here as well, and really important to think about. And then the other thing that maybe is a little prosaic and is also not cyber, I went out to visit that site. It's not as glamorous as it sounds to have a site in Kauai because it's a big bare field with lots of space, because when you set that off, you don't want to have lots around it. So I checked where the feral pigs had taken out some of the site silo, because that was a problem. And I had to check on whether we were properly NSA trained. What those are endangered geese-like things. And you cannot pick them up and move them. They're endangered, so you have to have specific training in how to gently move them right along. And I am not myself NSA trained, so when our car was stopped, I was not allowed to get out. We had to wait for someone to move them right along. But that's part of making sure that we do this in a responsible way with regard to the environment and the natural artifacts there. One of the things I am most pleased about, in addition to that rocket, which I do find very cool, is that we just got approved the cyber side for digital assurance for high consequence systems. And this, in a way, has been a dream of mine, and it's why I think this will be the slide that I'll end on for you today, is that, you know, what I started with back in my college days was really fury with the Morris worm in '88, so now you can get a sense of my age. But in 1988, I was absolutely furious that the Morris worm was able to take down something like 10–15% of the internet. It was a very small internet in those days. But still, it was very annoying. It killed my homework. I was not a happy camper. And I joined cyber because I thought, how hard can it be to fix this? Not there yet. But we've got hope. And one of the things that we thought was really important was a systems of systems approach, that one would be able to look at systems like high consequence systems and think about them designing security in, that one would have high assurance. And so the world has gone from looking at that to thinking about intrusion detection systems of better coding, and in a way we're coming back again. So on the very, very high consequence system, so think about that hypersonic rocket and all of the controls that would be Earth-side while that is moving around that need to be all correct. Think about Strategic Air Command and that mission and how secure we need that to be. Being able to identify for high consequence systems with surety that those things will behave as they ought to is part of being responsible as a defense provider. It's part of what we need to think about in our nation's defense. And there are other things, for instance, hospitals, for instance, all that we do with climate, every time we share our infrastructure, our banks, et cetera, all of that is a high consequence system that is maybe not the safer and more secure that we think of when we think of rockets, but it's the things that help us be happy and productive and collaborative, because security is partly what allows us to be collaborative if we do it in a responsible way. So with that, I'll go ahead and pause, and I think I may be able to give the moderators back a minute and a half. I'm told that a lot of people went something like 12 minutes over, and so I am going to do something unusual for me and just pause and say, once again, thank you for all of you being here. I remember the first time with the folding chairs, and I remember saying to people, there are 200 women here, and that is more women than I've ever seen in cybersecurity. When I was starting, we could say the redhead is Cynthia, the brunette is Deborah, and we had, not anymore, but Heather up in Canada. and it wasn't anything like this. And now there's thousands of you, thousands. There are more of you here than there were cybersecurity experts. And so I thank you for being here. I look forward and hope to be around when you have the next 10-year anniversary. And with that, I will get off the stage. Thank you for your kind attention.